I have a question about there is this question, there's a colleague, she works with me, and she asked me, would non-Muslims, they go to hell? So what's the definition of Islamic State? Is because of the law, or is because the majority of the people, the citizens, they are Muslims? In Islamic State, a Christian or a Jew, he want to marry according to his religion. This is allowed. He cannot marry like a man with a man.
No, this is not allowed in Islam.
What about like the dressing, like this hijab? You cannot like force it to the non-Muslims. What about the Jizya for the non-Muslims?
Them about that first. That's the problem.
I have a question about there is this question, there's a colleague, she works with me, and she asked me, would non-Muslims, they go to hell forever, or they go for purgatory?
Well,
do you have knowledge about that?
First of all, we don't know who will and who will not go to hell. So if a person, we're told, doesn't receive the message, so they're living on some island somewhere, as long as they act according to their fitrah, then for them is paradise.
Let's say for the Jews
maybe they never heard. Well,
Jews, the Christians, the atheists today.
Well, the Quran says, even amongst the Jews and the Christians, there are believers. This is what the Quran says. So the people who followed Musa alayhi salam, if they led a good life, they will go to Jannah, inshallah, paradise.
Even if they don't believe the Prophet?
Well, this is the thing, you see. When you have received the message, and if you believe it to be true, you are convinced, and then you reject it, then you're in deep water. Because now you know that Allah has told you to do something, you accepted it, and now you deny it. Now you're in trouble. Now, how much you understood, what your mental capacity was, whether you believed it and accepted it, or whether you genuinely did not accept it because maybe the message was not given to you in a good way or in a correct way, this is for Allah to judge. So, but if the word kufr means that you reject something after you are convinced of it being true. So you have an open heart, you investigate it, but maybe the person who told you about Islam, they said it to you in a very, very bad way, and you were not convinced. There's a difference between these people and people who genuinely accept something and they deny it. But who will go to hell and who will not go to hell, this is up to Allah.
But Allah definitely, He tells us in the Quran, I think He gave us like...
No, of course, but you see, what is in somebody's heart and what their connection to Allah, we can't see that. We can judge people because, we can say, okay, this person is not Muslim, and they have rejected, but maybe in their heart they've accepted it, maybe they've practiced a belief in some way. And Allah does say that Allah will remove from punishment even the people with the atom's weight, a seed, a mustard seed of Iman. Allah will take them out of the punishment and they will get Jannah.
This verse is applied to who?
Well, people who have even a mustard seed of Iman in their heart, a mustard seed of belief of Allah.
Even like agnostic or deist?
Well, again, brother,
I'm sorry.
First of all, I'm not a scholar, and I don't like to really enter into these discussions because it requires a deep amount of scholarship and knowledge and understanding. All I can say is, this is the message of Allah, this is the message of Islam, and Allah does say that there will be some people who will enter hellfire, the ones who reject. But we are told that, I heard one scholar say that there will be a lot of non-Muslims who may have an excuse on the Day of Judgment. Because they will say, everything we saw about this religion was negative, was bad. So we believed it to be bad, we believed it to be negative because of that. But maybe they still believe in a creator, maybe they still believe in God, maybe they still lead a good life. But everything they heard, everything they saw was negative. So they didn't accept the message. You understand? Now Allah we know is haqq. Allah will only deal with people in a just way. And so inshallah Allah will be just with everybody. We know that. This is how Allah is. Allah is just. And so they will be dealt with with justice. That's what we believe, inshallah.
Do you think that because this is a separate question anyway, do you think that, let's say that the Muslims one day, wherever in Europe or in our countries, they can rule according to the rules of God, according to the Sharia? Do you think that it will happen, this or no?
I don't believe that there's really anything in the Sharia, to be honest, that contradicts most of what people already accept and believe. I'll explain to you what I mean by that. Now, of course, when we talk about, in the Sharia, a woman should dress in a certain way or a man should dress in a certain way, if you look at Islamic history, there were many centuries where in Andalus and in Spain, there were many non-Muslims who didn't wear hijab. They were not persecuted. You understand?
So it's not like...
There was freedom. There was freedom. There was not this, everybody walking around with a stick, forcing everybody to wear hijab, forcing it. In fact, we're told that in a place where there are non-Muslims, according to their Sharia, if they drink alcohol, there's no punishment for them.
Really?
No, because it's not, according to their Sharia, it's not haram to drink alcohol. So you can't enforce your Sharia on somebody else.
Yeah, but if they live in an Islamic state,
if they're living in a Muslim country and they're not Muslim, then they can eat pork, they can drink alcohol.
Really?
Of course. You cannot enforce them to conform to your religion of Islam. There's no punishment on them.
So this punishment is for the Muslims actually?
If you are Muslim, even the punishment is when you do these things publicly. If you do it secretly in your house, the Sharia police cannot come and investigate. Why are you growing so many grapes in your garden? You understand my point? What you do in private is between you and Allah. But the enforcement for these things is when you do them publicly. Then it becomes a problem because it's seen as a corruption for society.
But when you say, when you say, for example, in Islamic State, so what's the definition of Islamic State? Is because of the law, or is because the majority of the people, the citizens, they are Muslims? How can we define?
Well, the legal system for the Muslims of that land are operated by using the Quran and the example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to govern. The government, the rulership. But that does not mean that if you have a Christian living there and he wants to eat pork, that you make it haram for him and you enforce that he doesn't eat pork. If he drinks wine, according to his Sharia, he can drink wine.
Even in public, for example?
Well, look, the thing is that generally speaking, these things are tolerated when you do them in the privacy of your home. And of course there will still be the law that you can't drink and drive, because now your freedom is affecting other people around you. Because if you drink and drive, you may have an accident, you may hurt people, right? So now when you do that in the public arena, it has an effect on other people around you. So there will be restrictions for that, of course. But what you do privately, you want to go to church, but it is true that the propagation of religion, where you take people into disbelief, start worshipping idols, this is not allowed.
Okay.
So in Saudi Arabia, you cannot go, or in Muslim countries, you cannot go and start encouraging people to worship idols. This is not permitted. You understand? So there are certain rules and regulations. But if in private you want to go to your temple and you want to worship idols, the Muslim government cannot come and destroy the temple. Okay. They cannot come and destroy the church. This is not acceptable in Islam. So what we see today, if you you look at Umar Khattab radiallahu anhu, we learn that he had treaties with non-Muslims, even with the Zoroastrians, the fire worshippers. There were treaties. You can enter into treaties, have peace between you. They were not forced to accept Islam.
So if, for example, let's say in Islamic State, a Christian or a Jew, they want to marry according to his religion, this is allowed.
Yeah, of course.
They will allow it.
Well, of
if,
course.
For example, an atheist, he lives in Islamic State and he want to marry 4 wives. Is this allowed? They allow him to have 4 wives?
Well, because look, according to his Sharia, it's not disallowed.
Yeah.
So he can marry 10 if he wants to marry 10. It's nothing to do with the. It's nothing to do with the. His Sharia is different. So he can do whatever he likes according to his Sharia. But of course, there are certain restrictions. So, for example, he cannot marry a Muslim woman because under Islam she has protection. If she marries a non-Muslim, then there's no protection for her.
And he cannot marry like a man with a man?
No, this is not allowed in Islam. Marriage is between a man and a woman in Islam. There is no nikah, there's no marriage between a man and a man.
Even if like these 2 atheists, they live in an Islamic State, and let's say they're both of them males, they want to engage marriage, the Islamic State, they tell them no.
Of course, because this is, look, every country has its moral norms. Every country. So, if 2 men are living together, the Islamic State cannot ask them, are you guys homosexual? The Islamic rulership cannot question their relationship. What they do in private, it is between them and Allah. But if you now make something public, even a man and a woman acting in a physical way in public, this is not permitted in Islam, because the morality of Islamic rulership is that these things are not permitted publicly. So you can't just suddenly go and start kissing a woman on the street, because this is not seen as morally acceptable. Okay, if 2 men are together, they're living together. Islam cannot. People cannot go and investigate why are these 2 men living together. You understand? This is private between them and Allah. But if you bring something in the public domain, whether you're a man and a woman, or a man and a man, this is not acceptable in the public domain, because this is our morality. This is our sense of decency. And this is for the society around you not to be affected by your freedoms. Your freedoms are your freedoms, private to you. You cannot now make other people have to witness what you're doing, possibly children or whatever, and force them to have to partake in that into that sort of public arena. So it's very accommodating. It is very much accommodating. In fact, when we look at centuries of Islamic rule, there were many religions living there, and they were living in peace. And when for example, in Spain, when the Crusaders went in to Spain to overthrow the Muslim empire in Spain, many Christians and Jews, they left with the Muslims to settle in North Africa. Why?
Because they liked it.
Because they knew they had freedom under the Muslim rulership. Now, I'm not saying all of the rulers in history were good people. Of course they were not. But this shows you the main principle of Islam, that we don't force ourselves. Allah says in the Quran, there's no compulsion in religion. You can't force somebody to accept Islam.
No, this one I know. When it comes to the rules, for example, let's say you are in Islamic State, the majority of people that are Muslims, and the law of the state, it comes from the Quran and the Hadith and the Sharia. There is certain things which you explained to me. What about like the dressing, like this hijab? You cannot like force it to the non-Muslims, because they.
But there is, in Muslim countries, they still have some basic rules. In other words, you can't dress in a miniskirt and walk on the streets on a miniskirt. Why? Because your freedom now is infringing on other people's freedom. right? Because if I don't want to see that, why are you forcing that upon me to see that? You could argue, well, you can look away.
Yeah.
Okay, but a 13-year-old boy is not going to look away. We've all been 13.
Yeah.
You understand? And another woman, she might not want her husband or her son to be looking at these things. It's acceptable. You understand?
Yeah.
So there's some basic rules. She doesn't have to be dressed in a niqab necessarily.
Or hijab.
But there has to be some modesty. So they have basic rules. But if you go to certain Muslim countries, Oman, Dubai, Qatar, you know, the women, they dress modestly. They might wear some long trousers, they may wear a blouse, they cover their arms, they cover their bodies. You know, in a Muslim country, there's there are norms of society. Just like we, in England, we have our norms of society, we have our moral code here. And if somebody comes in, they come in and they behave in a certain way, we have the right in England to say, look, our moral norms in society here are not these things, so I'm sorry, we don't accept that here. You understand my point? So we should, in England or in the West, we should not feel that the Western moral code is an absolute and everything we say here is right and everything they do there is wrong. They have their moral consensus. It may come from religion, it may come from their tradition. That's their moral code. We have to respect that when we go there, just like we expect people to respect British moral code when they come here.
Sure.
Right? There has to be a fair exchange.
That's really. What about the jizya for the non-Muslims?
The jizya, look, the jizya is just like a tax. The Muslim actually has to pay much more than the jizya. Zakat is more than jizya. So a government needs money to operate. You need an army, you need a defense army, you need to do the roads, you need lighting, you need hospitals. So the Muslim has to pay zakah and he has to give sadaqah regularly, right? I mean, it's not compulsory, but it's very highly recommended. And mashallah, most Muslims, they do give. They give a lot of money. In fact, in this country, in England, they did a statistic in the Guardian newspaper. And they did Muslim, Christian, Jew, atheist, Hindu, Sikh. They found that the most charitable people, more than 440 or 50 pounds per year, the Muslim person was giving. Okay? So now the jizya means, what does the jizya mean? People say, oh, it's to humiliate the non-Muslim, it's to keep them down, it's to, no.
Second class.
No, not at all. When the non-Muslim gives jizya, number one, he doesn't have to defend the state in the military. Okay. So if somebody comes to attack the country, he can say, listen, I've paid my tax, you defend me. You Muslims have to defend me now. You go and risk your life and defend my property and defend my life and my family because I've given the tax of jizya.
So if someone is in the military is not going to pay the jizya?
No, of course, everyone has to pay the jizya. But it's not compulsory for him to join the army. But for the Muslim, it's compulsory. If the Christian or the Jew or the atheist is being attacked, the Muslim has to risk his own life and stop the attack against his fellow countryman Jew, countryman Christian, countryman atheist, because he's given his jizya, he's given his tax. And so this concept is very widely misunderstood in the West. They see it as an oppressive tax on the non-Muslim. The Muslim has to pay more and he has far more responsibilities. And in Spain, when the Crusaders came in and the Muslims could not defend the Jews and the Christians, what did they do? Do you know?
They gave them the money back.
They gave them the jizya back. They said, look, I'm sorry, but the armies are too strong, we can't defend you, please take your jizya back. So this is, Islam, alhamdulillah, is a very fair and a very just system. unfortunately, some of us Muslims have made it unjust because we bring our tradition, culture, politics, and all of these horrible things. But alhamdulillah, look, if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Quran says it very clearly that if you were not just and you were not, of good character, a good person, these people around you would have never accepted you. Then why did they accept him sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Because they knew he was honest, he was sincere, and they knew that there was no one better that they had ever met in their entire lives to match the character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They knew this. Many of them who fought him for decades, some of them who still did not accept Islam, but secretly they admitted that wallahi Allah is our witness, because they believed in Allah as well. They believed in the supreme God. They believed the greatest God was Allah. They even believed that concept. And they said that he is an honest man. He is a just man.
I have a last question, if you don't mind. The Prophet Muhammad, he's not like just like a spiritual. He's not like just a prophet come to teach the people how God forgive the sin, or he come to establish a state as well, is he?
Well, this is why the book written by I think it's Jonathan Hart, is it? Michael Hart, right? In that he discusses the most influential person of history, and he picks 100 people. And the reason why he picks Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as number one,
he said he was excelling
in every field. He succeeded as a religious leader, as a moral code, as a political leader, on the whole spectrum of leadership. He's the only one that managed to tick all of the boxes.
Now my question is all the prophets, they came to do that, or just the Prophet Muhammad?
Well, they all came with a law.
No, do they come, all of them, to like as not just as a spiritual leaders, as political leaders as well, or just?
Well, this term political leader,
whatever,
the definition of this political leader today has become very murky. Very there's a lot of connotations, a lot of different understanding of politician or political. When you have a government that is in control of the affairs of the people, in modern terms it becomes a political and a religious code. And so of course, look, there are many systems within an Islamic system that may fall not necessarily literally within the definition of the Quran and Islam. So for example, I'll give you an argument. If you have a plane crash and people die and this happens or that happens, there are certain things that you will employ that might be just a question of governance, but not necessarily how are you going to conduct the investigation. Well, you're going to go to people who know how to do these things, right? You're not going to go to the sheikh and say, Sheikh, this plane crashed, and can you tell me from the Quran and from the Sunnah how I'm going to investigate this engine failure on this aircraft? You understand? You will go to somebody who knows. They may not be Muslim, right? They might be non-Muslim, they may be atheist, they may be Christian, they may be Jew, but they may have an expertise. And so Islam does not stop you from going to those who have knowledge. You understand? But the moral code, morality, justice, fairness, how you treat one another, this of course we get from Islam.
And all the prophets, they came to establish that.
Well, if you look at, for example, Judaism, the Jewish laws, yes? Within Israel at the moment, much of the laws is actually secular laws, right? But if they were truly following Moses, peace be upon him, then really a lot of their laws, if not most, if not all of their laws, should be based upon what the teachings of Moses were, or the Torah, right? Same with Christianity. If they truly thought that this was the way of life and this was the solution to all of our problems, then why rely on a state that doesn't even follow those principles of Jesus, where many things are done which are unfair and unjust?
The Christians, they say, well, Jesus, he doesn't care about politics, he didn't care.
Well, they say that they leave unto Caesar what is Caesar's. In other words, that we leave the running of the country. We leave the running of the country to the rulers, and we have our religion is private in our churches. But the problem you have is that what if the rulership contradicts with what you believe? You have a fundamental problem then. Maybe they want to push things on society that are harmful. What if tomorrow in this country they legalize prostitution? And if you're a Christian, and you know that Jesus would not have accepted this as a moral code, what are you going to do? There's a problem now, isn't there?
Of course. I don't think so. He would close his hand if Jesus.
You know what I'm saying? This is what I'm saying. So, but
Anyway, thank you very much.
Nice to talk to you.
I'm a Muslim, but I need.
Brother, we're all learning.
Yeah, I need.
I come here sometimes. I make a mistake. The brothers correct me. They say, Brother Abbas, you said this. This is wrong. I said, okay, astaghfirullah, may Allah forgive me. We're all learning.
Yeah.
You know.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Shukran.